Welcome all. Hopefully you can hear and see us. My name is Gerard Nicholson and I'll be chairing this session. The theme today is highly skilled workforces. So let's get started. There's 10 minutes Q&A at the end, so please post your comments in the chat. And if you have questions, post them in the Q&A tab. First up, we have Dr. Mark Kelly, who's been recently appointed as Head of Centre of Sustainability in GMIT. He's also a lecturer in the Department of Building and Civil Engineering. Mark has over 20 years research experience in the construction and waste management, resource efficiency, education for sustainability, BIM and the circular economy. He's joined by John Scahill. John is a lecturer in the Department of Building and Civil Engineering also. His teaching and research is focused around low energy NZ practices, BIM and sustainability in the higher education. The title of their talk is Rethinking Higher Education's Role in Lifelong Learning for a Transformative Built Environment Sector. Off you go, John and Mark.
Okay, many thanks, Gerard. John and I are delighted to present today some thoughts on the role higher education can play in supporting the digital and sustainability related transformation of the built environment sector. This presentation aims to outline the evolution of GMIT's role in developing courses for the sector, which has always had a strong industry focus. It will present some examples of how recent government initiatives have fast-tracked programs and how that has given us pause for reflection on what our role should be. Next slide, please, John. When we break the title down, we see three main themes: lifelong learning, the built environment, and higher education. Lifelong learning is an interesting concept as is often viewed in the domain of adult or continuing education, but of course it's much wider than that. We're all engaged in lifelong learning, whether consciously or subconsciously. It is often defined as being a formal education related to set learning activities, but I would again propose a much broader understanding of the term. It does relate to the personal, civic, social, and employment-related spheres. The terminology is also embedded into leadership or management theory with concepts such as the learning organization or the socioeconomic approach of a learning city, with Cork being a great example of this with their tagline of "a learning city is what a learning city does." Couple this with the significance of the built environment sector from an economic, political, social, and environmental point of view, and the continuous need for upskilling, reskilling, training, and CPD. This brings us to the role of the higher education sector. It's also always useful to reflect on what our role is, and more importantly, what our responsibilities are in relation to the students, staff, industry, and society at large. The Learning City tagline could also be applied as a learning university is what a learning university does. And this can relate to sustainability, diversity, equality, good governance, values, culture, etc. Next slide, please, John. Both John and I are lucky, and Gerard as well, to be part of a really progressive department in GMIT led by our head of department, Mayor Rogers, and our head of school, Professor Graham Heaslip. Over the past 40 years, the department has developed 4 core undergraduate programs which have aimed to equip graduates with the competencies required to make a positive contribution to the sector, both nationally and internationally. Next slide, please, John. Recently, over the last number of years, we've seen the development of a higher diploma in engineering and BIM, which was led by our session chair today, Gerard Nicholson, with Jim O'Connor and Mark Costello from RPS. What's interesting about this development is that it was the unique collaboration between academia and industry, between GMIT and RPS, which developed a program in pilot form first, using an outreach approach, focusing on specific modules, which eventually led to the launch of a flexible industry-focused course for all industry stakeholders. Next slide, please. Why this course is so interesting is when we see what it resulted in. This collaboration with RPS also directly informed the development of a reciprocal learning framework, which continues today to aim to take a holistic approach to curriculum development by utilizing the synergies with applied research within the department and industry best practice. This framework is also at the core of the development of the BIM Futures Group, and this has informed curriculum developed not only on the higher diploma, but across all undergraduate programs in the department. The BIM Futures Group also complements the BILS 360 research group within the department, which continues to explore circular economy applications across the built environment sector. Next slide, please, John. Recent developments resulting out of this have seen the development of a postgraduate diploma in MSc in Circular Economy Leadership for the Built Environment, which is funded under a Human Capital Initiative, which John will speak to in a couple of minutes, and is due to commence by the end of this month, and the development of postgraduate diploma in MSc in Pavement Digital Leadership, which is due to commence in January 2022, subject to validation. I will now hand you over to John, who will outline some of the other developments in this area.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to mention a number of the projects that GMIT are involved in that have been funded under the Human Capital Initiative. GMIT are fortunate enough to have been involved in 3 of these. The Human Capital Initiative was a government-sponsored initiative that was launched last year, and there were, I think, 19 projects sponsored or funded throughout Ireland, and GMIT were lucky enough to be involved in 3 of them. And the first one I mentioned there is the Higher Ed 4 project with IT Sligo. Ourselves and IT Sligo are involved in that, and Letterkenny. So it's basically the Connacht Ulster Alliance partnership are in that. It's a multidisciplinary project consisting of a set of interlinked innovations underpinned by a series of demonstration sub-projects to build and prove lean systems necessary to respond rapidly and effectively to the training and education needs identified. We're fortunate enough to have a number of sub-projects in GMIT. The next initiative, or the next project that we're involved in the HCI, is the realising the potential of recognition of prior learning and lifelong learning in Irish higher education. Now, for the construction sector, recognition of prior learning is very important, of course, because there's lots of people in the construction industry who have lots of practical experience, and the recognition of prior learning is a process that actually allows acknowledgement for this prior learning, which may not always be acknowledged when you're trying to undertake an academic program. Recognizing your professional practice and prior learning is something that's very important in construction and will be more important going forward. GMIT and LYIT and Sligo have been very active in this space over the years, and it's great to be involved in such a big project. And as you can see from the list of partners involved, it's considered very important across the higher education sector. The other project that we're involved in the HCI, and more so for myself and Mark, as we are very involved in this particular project, is called DASBE, which is a Digital Academy for a Sustainable Built Environment. And that is a project that's being led out by Limerick Institute of Technology. And we're lucky enough to have Liz O'Brien, who will be speaking later on today, giving a keynote speech in the next session on DASBE. This is a partnership between Limerick Institute of Technology at Lone, the Tipperary Energy Agency, and the Irish Green Building Council. It's a hub for providing upskilling and capacity building and education to the building sector on the green, construction, circular economy, and digital skills. So there's three themes that are identified in DASBE: energy, circular economy, and digital skills, and each of the institutes are taking a lead role in investigating those. I'm also going to talk a little bit now about some of the programs that we have developed in as a consequence of being part of DASBE, and we're hoping that that will be an ongoing project, because that is the DASBE project is running until 2025. And I'll briefly just outline some of the approaches that we're using in GMIT to develop lifelong learning in relation to the construction sector. So I'm just going to talk here a little bit about the projects that we have undertaken as part of DASBE. There's a picture there of Irene Hayden, who is leading out on the Future Build Educate project, which is going to be part of the DASBE suite. Mark mentioned the two MSCs that we're already working on, or that are already have been developed. There's another MSc that has been developed again by Irene Hayden on built environment regulation, and like the other programs, there's a postgraduate certificate or a certificate, postgraduate diploma or certificate involved with that, and also a certificate in fire safety. We're also looking at developing a postgraduate certificate in the Sustainable Development Goals for the built environment, again under DASBE. And the Future Build Educate project, which was existing before DASBE, but we're hoping that some of the resources that have been developed there are going to be rolled out, and that was 19 small little courses that are going to be rolled out on that, and that will be presented in the DASBE on the DASBE website. Liz O'Brien will take you through the details of exactly how all that will work later on. But these are the projects that we have on at the moment in development. We also have a fairly developed horizon scanning system in place, which means that the 3 institutes are proactively looking at what's coming down the road, talking with our industry partners and finding out exactly what sort of requirements are going to be in the construction industry going forward, and working at ways to proactively address any of the needs identified. A number of the, I'd like to just briefly mention 3 approaches which GMIT are taking at the moment. Digital badges, micro-credentials, and project-based learning. Digital badges, for those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're basically an online way of having a badge, as the name suggests. They offer a way to communicate or recognize performance in a particular area. They're easily shared, so you can have them on your web page or on your LinkedIn. Now, generally, digital badges indicate that you're an Excel user, or you're a Revit user, or maybe you're best in class. They're used a lot in undergraduate programs in GMIT. We have Dr. Wayne Gibbons here, who has done a lot of development on them, and they have been trialed and they have been found to work very well in the undergraduate space. They will be used probably along with the next thing I'd like to talk to you about, micro-credentials in recognizing learning in the construction industry going forward. Micro-credentials, again, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, may be defined as small units of assessed learning recognized by HEIs or other validated credential-bearing agencies. Digital badges in the main are not accredited, so you can get a digital badge for achieving sort of attendance records or whatever. Micro-credentials, on the other hand, are accredited, and they have to be assessed and validated by whatever organization. I don't think any of the 3 institutions involved in DASBE at the moment have a formal micro-credential policy, but I know they are all working on them. I think DCU in the country is probably the university that's leading out on this, but the idea is that you can do small, bite-sized pieces of learning, which ultimately, in some cases, they could be potentially stackable, so you may be able to sort of build them up. Liz O'Brien is going to talk to you in the next session about BINSEED, which is small, and she's going to talk to you about micro-credentials as well, so I'll leave her to go through more of the details on that. In our own institution in GMIT, an example of what we're hoping for in micro-credentials would be our work in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, so if you wanted to imagine the micro-credential model, there might be, you might do a micro-credential on each of the 17 sustainable goals, and maybe a 3-credit capstone piece of learning, which would give you a 20-credit special purpose award or minor award. So over to you. So thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Mark.
Thanks, John. Next slide there, Dan. Yeah, and so the last one that John mentioned there was project-based learning. And so this is trying to recognize, links into the RPL process, is trying to recognize people's unique learning experiences in the workplace. And it's another avenue we're looking at. So next slide, please, John. So I suppose all of these different approaches have seen an evolution away from the more traditional approach of, program development for industry. And, it's trying to meet the first question there, are we actually meeting the needs of the sector? And as John has mentioned, we're in continuous communication with the sector to see what their immediate needs are, their medium-term needs are, and their long-term needs. But another question that's really important is, are they meeting the needs of society? So when you're looking at it from a sustainability point of view, a civic point of view, and a quality and justice point of view. What is our role there? And again, do these courses or approaches, change everyday culture within the built environment sector? Do they change practice within the built environment sector? So there's a need sort of for a feedback loop to find out the effectiveness and the impact of all of these developments. Next slide, please, John. So when we look at the different ideas, I suppose, when we reflect on this, at the top there, we look at the idea of having a national BIM education and research framework across the whole of higher education and formed with intense collaboration with industry. The built environment sector is a highly competitive and fragmented industry. The higher education sector is a highly competitive sector as well. And we sort of need to move beyond that competitiveness to collaborate a lot more for the betterment of the sector and the betterment of society. There's also a big opportunity, as John mentioned, there's lots of postgraduate courses being developed there, and the question that could be posed is, does the sector need a huge amount of different postgraduate qualifications? Or is there an opportunity to have a collaborative approach where a person in industry can select, a module on BIM, a module on the circular economy, a module on NZEB or so on, and combine these into a collaborative master's program? Again, there's a big area of interest and exploration around the whole area of project-based qualifications. Every time somebody works on a project or walks onto a site, they're learning. So is there a way to match that work experience and continuous work experience by specific project or over time linked into charterships as well? And I think we have to be really responsive in our opportunities around micro-credentials and digital badges, because in some instances, the sector may need a very specific piece of learning around a certain type of thing. So maybe the preparation of a waste management plan or resource management plan, and can we produce a micro-credential or a digital badge around that can be done quickly and is autonomous to a certain extent and can align up with the CPD and CIRI requirements of the sector. And the final thought then is there an opportunity to explore with the DASBE project the creation of a virtual learning, virtual university for the sector? Next slide, please, John. And so when we think of a virtual university, and we've seen a lot of these, you see them e-campuses or e-universities, especially internationally. But I suppose something that we're exploring at the moment is that a virtual university is not just a repository of online courses, which is really important to have a place where everybody can go, a one-stop shop for all courses, both undergraduate, postgraduate, digital badges, micro-credentials for the built environment sector, and that's what we're hoping DASBE will be. But when we expand that concept a little bit, we're looking at an intuitive community of practice that facilitates personalized learning pathways and collections, so that somebody from the sector can log into their learning environment. They'll be prompted on what courses are relevant to their job description or their interests, and they can stack these qualifications to get a larger qualification over time. So it sort of goes outside the boundaries of higher education a little bit. And we can learn a lot of the development of MOOC courses over the last 5 to 6 years, which have embedded these strategies within their learning environments. It'll also hopefully facilitate collaboration across the higher education sector and curriculum co-design with industry, which we learned has been a fantastic benefit to GMIT, especially with our collaboration with RPS. And finally, it can bring the classroom to the site. So instead of taking people off projects and the time and cost and transport and resources that requires, you can also bring the classroom to the project, either on an individual basis or even on a group basis, aligned up with an organizational strategies and so on. Next slide, please, John.
Yeah.
So the last slide, I just want to highlight some, initiatives that we've been working on in the department over the last 18 months. And I suppose when COVID hit, obviously there was a lot of restrictions around site visits and things like that. So we explored, and we've been thinking about this for a long time, the whole idea of having a virtual site visit. And so this came about from an EPA funded project, which is actually looking at circular economy applications, where we track projects during the construction phase to identify are there any opportunities to prevent and reduce waste, reduce energy, and also reduce water use. But because we're tracking the project so closely, we decided to develop a sort of digital model of the projects, a BIM model, and link that to HoloBuilder to develop these virtual site visits. And so at the moment, we're completing some interviews with the site personnel on site, which will be linked to hotspots around the site. So a student hopefully will be able to go in to the virtual site visit, pick a particular day and be able to walk around the site virtually. And what we're trying to do is to experiment and pilot these as part of curriculum development with different lecturers to see how effective they are from a visualization and understanding of the basic technology elements of projects. And I'd like to direct you as well to our chair's discussion later on in I think it's the third session, which is looking at the whole area of gamification, because this is also embedded into this. So that's a really interesting presentation to look out for. Last slide, please, John. So that's us. It was sort of an exploratory presentation, just outlining the evolution of where we've gone from traditional program development now to looking at the whole area of digital badges, micro-credentials, project-based learning, and on to gamification to identify, how the sector can really meet the needs of industry and maybe lead the industry in their training and educational needs. If you need to contact either myself or John, our emails are there, and we'd welcome any questions at the end of the session. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mark and John. I think that gives you a good understanding of what's happening in GMIT and some of the future plans. And thanks for the mention, Mark. Yeah, the talk is up later on today. So up next, we have Liz O'Brien. Liz is a chartered architect and a sustainable energy engineer. She is the DASBE manager at Limerick Institute of Technology. The title of our talk is Recognize Micro-Learnings to Support the Digital Journey in the Construction Industry. Off you go, Liz.
Thanks, Gerard. Yeah, a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Welcome everyone, and thank you everybody for inviting me here today. Following on from what John and Mark has just presented, they talked about DASBE, but there's huge movement now in the construction industry, as we all know. And a lot of it is moving in the digital side of things, but also circular economy and energy. So this is one example I'm going to talk about, and it's the presentation is on a paper we wrote on recognized micro-learnings to support the industry. You see the authors here. There's myself, obviously, from Limerick Institute of Technology. Then there's Benim McDonough. Then there's Bojan Milovanovic, and he's from University of Zagreb in Croatia. And then Jose Lucas Macia, which is Catalonia Institute of Construction Technology in Spain. And we wrote this paper for BIMSEED. So as you can see, there's a few members on the BIMSEED. We are partners from Croatia, Hungary, Spain, and ourselves in Ireland. So LIT are the coordinators of this. So as Gerard says, I'm the DASBE manager. I was briefly mentioned by Mark and John previously, and I'll talk about it in more detail at the keynote speaker event. But if you need to get in touch with me, you have my email address there for anything about this paper. So a quick brief summary. LIT and Athlone Institute of Technology are joining forces and becoming a technological university of the Shannon on the 1st of October. So there's big changes here at the moment. We'll be a multi-campus with emphasis on research and development of future skills and needs. And that is one big focus within the new technology university. So Thurles will be the main campus for sustainability. That's where I'm based at in Tipperary. So there'll be full-time, part-time, online and micro-learnings. And this fits in very nicely what our friends in GMIT just talked about with accredited accredits and digital badges, etc., that will have a huge play in micro-learnings. So we're active, flexible learning, and what is important is progression and transfer for apprenticeships and the industry. So they're able to progress into different levels. And also extremely important to us is the learning community, because we have a huge community base here in Thurles. So why am I here today? I'm here to showcase the academic paper, recognise microlearnings to support the digital journey in the construction industry. And the aim of this paper is to demonstrate how the construction sector can be enriched using BIM and other digital tools. It's not just about BIM, and to improve the sustainability of the building environment. So there's sort of 5 chapters, as you can see there, and I'll just briefly go through them. So we all know the scale of the challenge. Rapid changes across the sector due to planning, building regulations, climate action and digitalisation changes, and also the fast modernisation of the construction industry. And it can be difficult to find relevant trainings. And although there is choice out there at higher vocational levels and by the industry, it's currently fragmented. And the solutions to improve employability and cost effectiveness for SMEs, because that's the main points of business as such, is extremely critical. There's a lot of lack of drivers to take up training. Mark mentioned it briefly about the workplace, how do you get time off work to do trainings? So this is one thing we're going to be looking at, on-site trainings using virtual items. There's also a shortage of skilled people and availability of training places. So there's a huge drive at the moment for NZEB training, especially at the ETVs and the industry as well as at higher education. So we're just now pushing into the digital realms and circular economy realms. So innovation, evolution of higher education, that's basically what we're doing at DASBE, developing that. I won't go into detail there because I'll be talking about it later. And of course, the image of the construction sector is widely perceived as low tech trades, but the construction industry has experienced its digital revolution. That's what everyone says, and it's true. There's a huge intensification of digital support in all stages of building design and construction. So it's literally from concept to completion to maintenance. And people always forget the facilities management side of things, and use of these buildings. So the huge changes in that. And one project we worked on, which is BIMSEED, which is what I'm talking about, actually considered all those points. Quickly specific to Ireland, we all know public buildings to be NZ by 2030, and there's 140,000 full-time workers needed. These are all new workers needed. We also talk about the residential retrofit of 500,000 homes up to B2, possibly to be reviewed. This needs another 400,000 full-time workers. And don't forget the 20,000 new homes to be built, and they're generally be covered by existing jobs. So there's huge, huge potential and need, which is why there's skill shortages in the industry. So a quick snapshot of drivers across Europe: developing NZEB training centres, digitalisation, advancing green technologies, awareness, which is extremely important for not just the construction industry, but everybody else outside the construction industry, micro-learnings and flexible education, skills recognition, which is the digital badges, etc., as well as a skills app that we're developing in another project called Buzzly. And that's among many other items you need to consider. To be honest, in Ireland, we have actually advanced a lot faster than a lot of Europe. We are up there with NZEB. We're well advanced with the NZEB side of things, believe it or not. So everybody's looking at Ireland at the moment for direction. So the current upskilling challenges, these are the main challenges: lack of motivation and time. So flexibility in delivery using blended or online approaches are needed, not this death by PowerPoint, which seems to be the norm in the old days. Micro-learnings using digital tools and practical hands-on upskilling. And that can be online in-house, which is really important, as colleagues mentioned earlier, with virtual living labs, or on-site. So we also need to stimulate awareness of the digital tools. So I suppose demand for quality workforce requires digital skills. That's foregone conclusion. We need to collaborate between education and industry in organisations, which we are doing now, and promoting champion case studies or best study case studies. And they can be virtual case studies. They don't have to be physical case studies. Lack of skills and expertise in SMEs. And there is a lot of lack of skills, especially with the digital side of things, but also circular economy. The energy aspects, we aren't too bad, but there's new roles coming on, so we need to fill those spaces as well. So SMEs need to upskill their workers and managers in energy and digital skills, adopt a training plan to upskill the team with in-house and online training. That's critical. And also hire specific expertise. So you can hire them for training, or you can hire them to be, contracted as or part of the team. And this will empower a stronger, united workforce and ensure loyalty and ensure competitiveness. That's important for businesses. Fragmentation, availability of trainings, a one-stop shop training platform or mobile app, essential to make it easier for the workforce to find suitable training nationally and locally. It's important to provide trainings locally as well as nationally. And we are developing some of those programs. As I said, the training app in Buzz League, but there's also the Construction Blueprint, which is an open educational resource. So the support and direct training progression pathways, that's important, and that will be part of the DASBE ethos as well. So new solitical and technological career opportunities, aging workforce with labour shortages. We need to motivate young people and women interested in climate protection, digital and IT jobs into the construction industry. And it's crucial to modernise the image of the industry and build the connection between young people and women. So you could see the percentages here, at the 50 to 64-year-olds, we're 31.5%, and this is in Ireland. So we do have quite an ageing construction industry. We really need to address that, as there's only 7.7% of the young people joining the construction industry, mainly due to the image and perception. So we also have mutual recognition of skills, that's been talked about before. Need for workers to be recognised for the skills. A skills register and or passport will stimulate the demand for upskilling and enable the companies to promote their competence and skill set. And this is going to start becoming a requirement in procurement and tendering. So it is an important fact to make sure you have the skill set in your business. So who are the actors? Basically, everyone in the construction industry and beyond, because we're talking about manufacturing companies who deliver for materials for the industry. We're talking about the hardware stores that sell the products and inform the general people. So it's everybody. So the new approaches to education and upskilling. It's an important factor in developing and modernising the construction industry and working with and for the industry. Many short learning units have been developed in some of these EU and Irish funded projects. So you see, many of these have training specific, and we're pushing these trainings through DASBE and creating short modules and programs that we can accredit. So, and BIMSEED is one of those. So the classroom is rapidly transitioning from a teaching centred to a learning centred environment. And this is known as active learning, which engages students in the process of learning through activities and discussion in class. So additionally, we use flipped classroom, which allows students to read the resources before the class, which allows a greater level of discussion and activity during the class. So it's important to strike a balance between theory and practice when developing training, and everyone needs to know not only the how, but also the why and what if. Because if something happens, you need to understand how to create a solution for any problem that arises. So the BIMSEED project establishes this balance. So the impact of microlearning using BIM to achieve NZEB. Let's look at BIMSEED in detail. There's a QR code there, which will be on the last slide. So if you want to take a snapshot to get into the BIMSEED website, you can. Otherwise, you have the website details there. So we develop short, flexible learning units to address gaps in the market. We do huge amounts of study on this and also collated information from other sources. We established an open educational resource across Europe and accredited through LIT. And we have a combination of blended learning units, which can be used in class, online, and on-site delivery. So we can do a combination of the two. Theory is generally done online, the rest can be done in any format. All the learning units will be used as standalone units, or we can group them together, as you can see in the diagram, or we can create a program, or we can integrate into existing programs, especially at higher education or vocational level. So the combination of learning units to be adapted easily to follow the changing industry needs in each country. So they were designed in a way that in 2 years' time, they can be adapted by changing very little of the actual content. And this strengthens links between VET and higher education. VET, by the way, is vocational educational training, if you're not aware of that. Higher education, research and development, industry, and SMEs using innovative digitalized technologies. So how does digitalization fit into NZEB, and with which aspects of NZEB can fit with BIM? This is what we think we achieved, and is being piloted and validated. So I can sort of say we have achieved this success. So as I said, after extensive research and surveys, a number of skills needs were presented, and we chose 12 learning unit topics as priorities. There were quite a few other gaps that need to be addressed, but we had to limit what we could develop. And of course, these were also other skills gaps acknowledged, which we have now started to develop further learning units, not in BIMZ, but in another programme. So they were developed at different levels. At national qualification levels 5 to 8, European qualifications are 4 to 7. And these are short units with 8 to 10 hours of contact and 20 to 36 hours of self-study. It sounds like a lot for self-study, but there's a lot of reading, playing around and practicing with BIM models, or practicing with other digital tools such as Trello, etc. So it depends up to the person, how much they want to do self-study. And they're all delivered in a blended format. As you can see, they range from fundamentals of NZEB and BIM for construction workers, advanced use of BIM to achieve NZEB construction and building services, specialised needs in facilities management, energy simulation and modelling. So if you wanted to look at these in more detail, go to the link there on bimz.eu and find out more about these. But if you're a trainer or educator, you can also register on the online trainer programme, again at bimz.eu. And on completion of this course, you get access to all the learning units, and the training resources are available to you. So you can use those and implement them into your own programmes. Now, this can't be done till March because we have to finish the project first, but everything is freely available to everyone once the EU funded project is completed. And of course, it's funded by Erasmus+, I need to mention that. But what is important is training plans have been set out, where Learning Unit 1 is the start of all training. So it gives you the baseline for all the NZEB and BIM information. One group we have created together is Learning Unit 1, 2 and 5. They are going to be tested out as a VET curricula by Waterford-Wexford Educational Training Board. That will be starting next month, I believe. But all the learning units are suitable for the industry, depending on the skill set required. And finally, we looked at the short to medium long-term impacts. So looking at the short term, we determined the skills gaps and needs of the construction sector. We determined availability of trainings and database of existing trainings. We created a roadmap used by higher education, vocational level and industry to develop other supports. We have a ready-to-use learning units on NZEB and BIM, which are compatible with higher education and VET programs, and can be used for trainers and students. So these are in the formats of reports and documentation, and they're all freely available on the bim.eu website. We also have an open access to an e-learning portal, which is based on LIT Moodle, specifically for BIMZ though. And this has all the learning material available. As I mentioned, if you complete the training and you're a trainer, it's all accessible to you. If you are from the industry, have a look on the website to see when the next training course is. And the learning units will be rolled out across EU as standalone training information grouped together as credited modules or added to existing programs. On a medium to long-term structure, the training content and materials will be using common learning units and with delivery suitable for everyone. Increase capacity of higher education and vet sectors to develop and implement new and adapt existing programs. And that's critical because a lot of the programs are, to be honest, are out of date. So we do need to adapt these to be responsive to a fast changing sector. Better training opportunities for students and SMEs, improving skills in the workforce, and better collaborative opportunities for the education bodies to establish mutually recognised learning units and programmes across Europe. And this will enable mobility of a mutually recognised skilled workforce. And we need workforce coming from Europe to fulfil some of our skilled, some of our jobs that are needed. We do not have the capacity to do that. We're not big enough a country to fulfil all these roles. General improvement of the construction sector image with increased attractiveness and competitiveness, especially bringing in the young people and the women into the workforce. So we need to work with industry, R&D and policymakers. And the paper is available on request, and thank you for listening. The paper is also on the website, so you can go there also for it. And that's it from me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Liz. In GMIT, we're given the opportunity to pilot some of that learning content, so thanks for that. And I also did apply to the pilot scheme, so it's a great course. Thanks. Tony Woods is up next from Midland Steel. Tony Woods is Managing Director of Midland Steel. The title of his talk is Construction Robotics for Off-Site Manufacturing. Go ahead, Tony.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to have a discussion with you all this morning. As Gerard pointed out, we're a reinforcement company, and I suppose what we have tried to do with our business is move it towards the digitalization industry, I suppose, because we believe for 100% sure that we need to, and we need to very fast. We became a company in reinforcement in 1999, just a little bit about us. 4 locations now, and we have a capacity to supply in excess of around 250,000 tons of steel annually. Back in 2012, we went down the BIM route. We were one of the first companies, I suppose, to go down that route, as I saw the opportunity of moving further towards 3D and what it could do for our industry. Reinforcement in concrete is something that's very, very traditional. It always has been traditional. And we have brought the industry, from our point of view, from a very traditional based process with lots of manual labor, right down now to we are now a full off-site rebar solutions provider in the industry. And we've done that through using technology, using the digital platforms that we enable ourselves to acquire using Trimble, and working with Trimble to develop further solutions as well. In line with that, in 2016, all of what Liz has just mentioned, we have identified that will be a substantial problem for our industry. And we looked at what we could do in terms of having lesser problems with labor, reducing our health and safety risks. And I suppose the Far East are well known, widely known for being well ahead of the Western world in terms of robotics and using the digital process and technology in robotics. What we did was made contact with a company in Korea. We asked them to pilot a project for us, and we are now the first company in the Western world to be utilizing a robot process in our business, which in then turn brought us to the next phase of where we're going to go, and I'll show you in the next slide. The reason we did this predominantly was for safety. And we decided, look, we needed to change the process of the way reinforcement is cut and bent, optimizing our production. And then, of course, we thought about the future of operators in manual labor is declining on a rapidly annual basis, and the availability of operators is becoming less and less. Our industry probably moved to digitalization when iPhones and iPads started appearing. So what we have now is upskilled our operators on the machines that we utilize. Previously, this was a manual-based process. An operator would take the material from a table underneath the head of the machine. This is now the process that we're using. And by using the BIM tools, we have fully digitalized the process from our office-based data entry right through to the robotic process that you've just seen, placing the material in sacks on a manual basis. The next phase of where we need to go as a company, we believe, is to initiate robotic manufacturing and upskilling our people. And the people, I suppose, are the biggest thing in everybody's business. Without people, you have no business. And we have identified that digitalization is a very big part of our strategy going forward, using the BIM tools to manufacture material, but also, as you can see in the right-hand picture, we have developed modular solutions in reinforcement for the first time ever. And all by using digital tools, digitalization, and then initiating the robotics manufacturing process with it. We are currently trialing and testing further robots now, and it is our plan to initiate and upskill our full workforce that we currently have as welders and operators to become robotic engineers. The current process is extremely manual, operative, difficult process, and the age of the operators, as Liz also pointed out, has been an identification mark for us as well. We have seen that the average age of the operators is steadily increasing, with less and less coming towards the industry from a manual-based process. So we have decided that we are now becoming a company who will be offering new roles in our business, which will be namely saying a robotic operator instead of a welder or a steel fixer. Future talent, I suppose, is, you know, it's key to everybody's business. We want to attract good quality talent to our business. Mechanical and electrical engineers are now becoming part of pattern with everybody in the manufacturing industry, and utilizing our BIM process right through to our end manufacturing process. The construction industry has to be influenced by the supply chain by attracting new, more modern methods of construction, all the while keeping the employees engaged and interested in their work. So we want to apply that digital and automated process and make these jobs available to the industry. What that would bring to us as a company, we believe, is production efficiency. Because the robotic increased outputs are therefore very competitive, the company over in time will employ a little more people in terms of delivering of product and becoming more productivity, so we will have more volumes. It improves the working environment and the safety environment enormously. Employee welfare can be significantly improved by using this process. And the HSE in the UK and here in Ireland have identified that the welding fumes of welding process is something that they're very concerned about now. Hence why 2 years ago we've taken the view that yes, we need to do something about this. And now with the robotics using utilizing the welding process, we will reduce manual labor, we will reduce health and safety risk, and we will reduce handling. I suppose the other part of it is very important. I mean, giving operators a rewarding job, people need to feel rewarded when they come to work. They need to feel part of something. They need to be very, very involved and interested in their process and wanting the company to succeed. So upskilling the staff with the digital and automated solutions they have interest in and working with, which will be very, very important to what Lisa's just mentioned in terms of training, availability of training. Correct, a lot of companies are not moving towards the process fast enough to give employees, current employees, upskilling opportunities. We have a process in place and a strategy in place to upskill all of our workforce, because again, we're clearly of the opinion that in 10 years' time, we will not have available manual operatives to work our business. We will have to have an automated process. And on the automation side, I suppose cost saving is the ultimate improvement in companies' profitability. So we believe that the digital world is here. We are actively taking part in it as a company. Robotics now is becoming a very, very interesting strategy for us. Implemented one, we have 2 in trials, and we expect to put 2 more in trials in 2022. So that's my presentation for now. Thank you all for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning.
Okay, thanks, Tony. A few years ago, I heard you speak, and I thought it was the most amazing presentation when you talked about prefabrication, and now we can see you're still innovating. Unfortunately, we have gone over time, so we won't have any time for any Q&A, questions and answers. So for this session, I'm just going to close it out. So thanks very much for attending, and thanks to all the speakers.